Sermon series we are launching this morning. It's called Us. So, what did you expect? And let me just say right off the bat a couple of things. One, this isn't just for married people. If you're here this morning and you're single, I know we got a lot of. Do we got Westmont soccer team here? We got you guys here. I'm so glad you're here. Yeah, we welcome you guys here today. This is for folks that are in college and high school. This is for folks who are thinking a bit about getting married. This is for folks who are divorced or thinking about getting divorced. For people that are thinking about getting remarried. I think that this sermon series is really going to equip us and encourage us and help us, and for some, heal us and fill us with hope that tomorrow can be a better day, that next week can be better, and next year can be better if we align ourselves with what God says about relationships and about marriage. And some of you may be asking, but why are we doing this series now in the year of Up? And to be honest with you, I was thinking about, well, let's wait for the year of In, which is next year, where we focus on the one another passages and we think about community. But the more I thought about marriage and doing a lot of reading in Scripture, but also several books, just again reminded that what happens horizontally is impacted by what happens vertically. And when I get this right, when I'm close to God, when I'm pursuing God, He's at work in this relationship. And when I'm neglecting this seems to be more strained, more challenging, more troubling. And I want to just say this. I know that some of us this morning might go, ooh, he's stepping on my toes. And I just want to say that to really get something out of this series, it's going to take two things. It's going to take humility. Humility means you don't have all the answers. Humility means there's something that you can learn. Humility means you're not going to get defensive and go, what about, and all of a sudden you put your wall up. Humility says you're going to lean in this morning and say, God, speak to me. I can grow. I can change. I can approach my marriage differently than I am. I can see it differently than I do. But if you sit here and you go, my husband needs to be here. He needs to hear this. My wife needs to hear this. My girlfriend. No, this is for you. Don't think about the person. This is for you. But that takes humility because our flesh, our self, doesn't think that we have room to grow. That's what we call a blind spot. And some of us are blind to our blind spots, right? And so the second part of that, though, is courage. The courage to stick with it when you maybe are thinking about giving up. The courage to look in the mirror at your own life and say, maybe I do have blind spots. The courage to ask your spouse if you have a blind spot. And so humility and courage. The courage to say, God, change me. God, work in my life. That's what it's going to take for all of us this morning and in the next few weeks, for God to do something significant and supernatural. And I got to tell you, I get nervous doing a sermon like this because, as you know, 50% of marriages today end in divorce. And it's not because of abuse, adultery, or abandonment. Although 99% of people that get divorced are saying, she's abusing me, and they call abuse something that applies to them. Or adultery. It may not be she's sleeping with another man, but she's having an affair with her work, and I never see her. Or whatever. And abandonment, it's not that he moved to New York and just ditched you, but he's emotionally unavailable. Those are all concerns, but I don't know that they're reasons to get divorced. And I don't know that Scripture says they're reasons. So already, even just saying that, I know some of you are, just lean in, take a deep breath, be open to the Holy Spirit. And let me just jump right into it. The series is called, So What did you expect? What did you, some of you are here this morning and you are actually thriving. You're in a really healthy marriage, strong marriage, not perfect, but you'd sit here and you'd say, boy, on a scale of 1 to 10, we both would say we're a 8 or a 9. We are really in the spring and summer of marriage. Others of you, though, are here and you're thinking, man, I'm a 9, but your wife would say, we're a 2. And that's a problem. Let me just say that's a problem. That might even be a question you ask on the way home. Hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, how's our marriage? Where do you see our marriage? That takes courage to ask that question, by the way. But you know, some of you think you have a 9, but your spouse is suffering silently, maybe afraid to bring it up, afraid to how, you know, it might spark anger, it might spark serious conflict, and they're afraid of conflict, so they'll just, you know, go along and say, yeah, we're a 7 or an 8, when they're silently thinking it's a 1 or a 2. But here's the other thing. Some of you are in a lonely marriage. Some single people, when you get married, don't think that's going to cure your loneliness. Some of the most lonely people on the planet are married people. Just know that. Be aware of that. Some of you are here and you're willing and you want to work on your marriage, but your spouse is not here, and they're not willing, and they don't want to work on it. And so this morning, I want to just say that the heartache, the hurt, the disappointment, the disillusionment that we feel in marriage, you can't be married without going through some of that hurt, heartache, disillusionment, disappointment. But it comes from expectations. What did you expect? They're unmet expectations, and for some, they're unrealistic expectations. You expected this, and you're getting that. I expected you to become this by now, and you've only become that, right? It could be I expect you to pick up your clothes every day, and instead, I'm not, and I expect you not to nag me and yell at me every day about it. There's an expectation about behavior, right? I expected you to be more involved with the kids, but you seem way more interested in your career or friends. It's an unmet expectation. I heard this one a couple weeks ago. I expect that if we can't afford a spa day with the girls, then we can't afford you to have a golf day with the boys. Okay, that makes sense to me, but the guy's going, I got to do it for business, but you can't go do your thing and spend, and money becomes the, so these expectations about so many things, money, sex, meals, cooking, friends, weight gain, weight loss, arguing, kids, these are all things I hear when I counsel couples, when I meet with couples, when we talk with friends. And you hear these things too. So here's the question. Cinderella and Huck Finn get married and jump onto the love boat. And we're wondering why marriage is so difficult. But that's real life. If you have a Bible, look at 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 28. Some of you may not know that this is actually in the Bible. Here's what it says. Those who marry will face many troubles in this life. The Bible says that. Those who marry will face many troubles in this life. Why? Because men and women are different. Different backgrounds. You take two people with different backgrounds, different family histories, different temperaments, different likes and dislikes, preferences, personalities, different expectations. You put them under the same roof or throw them on a love boat, and is it any wonder that that love boat doesn't become shipwrecked really quick? And so I love Chris Brown. He's a pastor from, I think he's at North Coast in San Diego. He's got a great sermon on marriage, by the way, if you look it up. But he says this, if you want a trouble-free life, don't get married. A strong marriage is not trouble-free. It handles trouble well. That's Chris Brown. And in this passage, the Apostle Paul is writing about marriage, about divorce, about singleness, and about how complicated and messy relationships are. And here's another quote from Chris Brown. I just think it's true. Single people, listen up. People that are divorced and thinking about remarrying, listen up. This is what Paul is saying. The best time to get divorced is before you get married. Now just think about that. The best time to get divorced is before you get married. It's so sad to think that so many marriages are sources of pain to the point where we give up on each other and give up on us. And so you have an outline on the back of your program, and I'm going to walk you through that. But before we jump into that, we have a special song to kind of prepare us for the message. And maybe as you listen to this song, how about just say a prayer? God, speak to me today. God, have your way in my heart today. Rather than sitting there defensive or thinking this person needs to hear this sermon, this is for you. Just stop the craziness and insanity about thinking about everybody else and open your heart to what God wants to do in your heart and life this morning. I, John, take you, Natalie, to be my wife, my lawfully wedded wife. I promise before God and our family and friends to be your faithful husband, for better or worse. In fact, we celebrate our 32nd anniversary this week, 32 years of marriage. It's awesome. Clap for her. There have been many times, not once or twice, many times, where both of us have thought, for better or for worse, oh, this must be the for worse part. There have been times we've thought, I didn't sign up for this. I can't keep doing this. In sickness and in health. Oh, in sickness, I'll give you a Kleenex if you got a cold. But something more severe and extreme, I don't know if I signed up for that, right? And we have people in this church, for richer and poorer, that have lived through those vows. People in this audience today that have lived through stuff that people do get divorced over, and they've stuck it out. Not stuck it out and been miserable, but stuck it out and fought for their love, fought for their unity, fought for their oneness. We have people in this audience that have overcome adultery and affairs, and emotional abuse, argumentative, abrasive spouse, but stuck with it and got help and trusted God. And were patient and said, I'm just going to continue to pray that God works. And they didn't change in a day or a week or a month or even a year. We have people in this church that made millions and lost it all. You think they'd learn from that? They made millions again and lost it all. Imagine being married to that, right? Made millions again and lost it all. Some people would divorce over that. See, the issues that people, and this, I know it's sensitive for those of you that are divorced, but this is not going to be a trophy sermon where every kid gets a trophy because we participated. This is, and every person doesn't get a trophy this morning, but this is, I do want to say there are people in this church that are modeling for Natalie and I, and you, what that means for better or worse. People that have been married to someone who faced a terminal illness. I didn't sign up for, yes, you did. I didn't sign up for someone who was going to lose millions. Yes, you did. I didn't sign up for someone who was going to, rather than throw their arms around me, throw their shoe at me. Yes, you did. And I know that, but I'm just going to say this. I did a wedding this weekend, and the couple decided to rewrite the ceremony. So okay, and they sent it to me. And I was like, this is interesting. So rather than, do you, John, take Natalie to be your wife, and do you promise to love her, to honor her, and to serve her? They rewrote it and said, John, do you take Natalie to be your wife, and do you promise to make her happy, and do you promise to see her find self-fulfillment? And I went, what? No. Rather than email them back, I picked up the phone and I called them this week. I said, I wanted to shake them. No. Maybe, of course we all want to be happy, but the purpose of marriage isn't that. You might make a career out of being unhappy, and it has nothing to do with the person you're married to. And marriage is not about you becoming self-fulfilled. Marriage is going to require sacrifice and service, and sometimes giving up self-fulfillment for the greater good and cause. And so I want to walk through the outline this morning. I feel, you can tell I feel so passionate about this. And I just want to say, if you're here this morning and you're thinking about giving up, like that song, I would say, hang on for this series. Hang on for 30 days. And begin to apply the things we talk about over the next few weeks. And see and invite God. Invite God into your relationship and into this and ask Him to heal the hurt, the wounds, the disappointment. And ask Him to change you, to change your perspective. In a recent study by the Institute of American Values that was chaired by sociologist Dr. Linda Waite of the University of Chicago, researchers asked, does divorce make people happy? Here's what they found. They found that those who ended their troubled marriage and divorce were not any happier than those who remained married. In fact, 2/3 of those who stayed married reported happy marriages 5 years later. Really? How's that possible? Well, think about it. If I divorce Natalie today and I meet somebody who's younger and cuter and I'm bringing my stuff with me. I'm bringing my issues with me. So, of course, might be a really fun thing for a few years, but eventually that catches up to us and there will be troubles. Anybody who is married will face challenges and heartache and disappointment. Don't be surprised by that. Christian marriage invites us to rethink our perspective on marriage. So here's the 3 points. I married the wrong person. Now what? Some of you are sitting here and you've thought, I've thought that. Natalie, well, I asked Natalie if she thought that, and she says, boy, the Thursday after our honeymoon. So point number 1, marriage is not about finding the right person, but about becoming the right person. Genesis chapter 29. Now Laban had 2 daughters. The older daughter was named Leah. The younger one was Rachel. There was no sparkle in Leah's eyes, but Rachel had a beautiful figure and a lovely face. Since Jacob was in love with the younger daughter Rachel, he told her father, I'll work for you for 7 years if you'll give me Rachel, your younger daughter, as my wife. Laban replied, agreed. I'd rather give her to you than to anybody else. Stay and work with me. So Jacob did. But his love for Rachel was so strong that those 7 years seemed like a few days. Finally, the time came for him to marry her. I fulfilled my agreement, Jacob said to Laban. Now give me my wife so I can sleep with her. So Laban invited everyone in the neighborhood, prepared a wedding feast. Verse 23, but that night when it was dark, Laban took Leah, not Rachel, Leah, to Jacob, and he slept with her. And when Jacob woke up in the morning, he discovered, and here's what the text says, it was Leah. And with rage he said, what have you done to me? I worked 7 years for Rachel. Why have you tricked me? Now here's the question. I'm wondering what it was like for you the day you woke up to discover that he or she was not the man or the woman that you thought you married. Craig Barnes, president of Princeton Theological Seminary, has a devotion on this text. And some of his comments are, we fall in love with Rachel, but we wake up someday to Leah, every one of us. Women, for you, you fall in love with Joseph and you wake up to Joey Buttafuoco, okay? Both sides, men and women. You think you're marrying one person, and one day you wake up and you go, I feel tricked. I feel deceived. I'm filled with disillusionment. And this is true for both men and women. The person you thought you married is not that person. You have a quote in your program by Stan Auerbach. He was named, by the way, America's best theologian by Time magazine. Professor of theology and ethics, both at Duke University and at Notre Dame. And here's what he argues. Listen to this. We always marry the wrong person. That is, we never marry the one we thought we were marrying because marriage changes us. So you wake up one day and you realize that the person next to you is not the person you committed your life to 5 years ago. But of course, you're not the same person either, even if you think you are. So what do you do then? And now listen to this line. He says, if marriage is the correct choice, which we would say finding the right person, if marriage is the correct choice of the right person to whom we are emotionally attached, you are in big trouble. The person has changed, and so have your emotions. Nobody ever chose to marry a person who's addicted to alcohol or who develops a terminal illness. But, he writes, lots of times you wake up in a marriage, and that's the person you've got. So what do? Let me just say this. God is not telling you or calling you to settle in and be miserable for the rest of your life. Well, I made a commitment, and I don't think God's honored by marriage. I've been married 60 years. My wife and I, we don't talk, and we yell at each other every day, and but we're still together. That's not God honoring. Let's just be clear about that. But permanence is God's will. When you said, yes, I do, permanence became God's will for your marriage. I want to be clear about that. God is calling us to trust Him, to work on yourself, to grow and become that husband, that wife that He dreams for you to become. So back to Jacob, Rachel, and Leah. Craig Barnes, president of Princeton Seminary, he goes on to say this. Listen to, I thought this was so, I never heard this. He writes this: after Jacob spent the night wrestling with God, it changed everything for him. The proof is when Rachel died during a journey, he buried her on the side of the road. When Leah died, she was buried in the family plot with Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, and right next to the place he would rest forever. And then he writes this. Here's his comment. In the end, Jacob chose the gift from God over the fantasy. He chose to give up the trophy wife, is what he goes on to say. And some of us have this fantasy of what the perfect person is. Marriage isn't about finding the perfect or the right person. It's about letting God change us from the inside out and us becoming the right person. Are you with me? Does that make sense? That's hard, but it's true, and it's biblical. Second point, marriage is not about making you happy. It's about making you, say it, holy. That's from Gary Thomas's book, The Sacred Marriage. Let me say it again. Marriage, point 2 in your outline, is not about making you happy. It's about making you holy. I can't tell you how many people say the reason they get divorced, I'm not happy anymore. I'm not happy anymore. It's not your spouse's job to make you happy. It's not. If you're not happy single, you're not going to be happy married. You're not. Some people make a career out of being unhappy. They do. That's why this is so important. That word holy, what do you mean, John? Marriage is about making me holy. When we think of holy, we think, I don't know about you, but I think like squeaky clean perfect, right? Well, that's not holy. But we think, oh, it means I'm extremely moral. Well, morality and holiness do have a connection. That's true. But the primary definition of holiness is set apart and devoted to God. We're back here. That's why we're doing this sermon series in the year of up, not in the year of in, because when I get this right, I have a different perspective. Let's say it that way. I have a different perspective about my marriage, about my most important relationships. This has been true for my wife and I would say. Marriage is God's graduate school for building our character and making us more like Jesus. Marriage is God's graduate school. Some of you are getting a PhD right now in marriage. Not because you're reading a bunch of books and writing a bunch of papers, but because of the way you're living. Because that you're aligned with God's purposes, God's roadmap. You've decided, I'm going to follow the blueprints. We're going to build a house together. Wouldn't it make sense that you work off the same set of blueprints rather than one has one set of blueprints and one has the other? And when you get on the same page, and this is so important for you single people or people that are divorced and want to get remarried, and I'm The reason I'm picking on people who are divorced and maybe want to get remarried is because I do a lot of weddings for people that get remarried, and they sit in my office and I say, well, let's talk about marriage. All they want to talk about is the wedding. And I go, well, let's talk about your relationship. Hey, this isn't our first rodeo, you know. We've both been divorced. We know what we're getting into. Do you know that the statistics are higher for divorce in second marriages than first? Why is that? Let's go back to humility. Let's go back to humility. If you're divorced, you have something to learn. And I don't do that to shame or guilt anyone. I be teachable, be open. Maybe there's something that you're missing. Maybe there's a blind spot. And so what we see here in our culture, I don't know if this is true for you, but when I look at our culture, how does our culture talk about love? It talks about how we feel. Love is an emotion, right? But you look at the Bible, and when God talks about love, what does he talk about? What do we see written in the Scriptures? Love is a choice. Love is a decision. Love is an action. It's not a tingly feeling. It's not goosebumps. I mean, that's fun, and that's cool, and that's part of relationships. But mature love is about commitment. 1 Corinthians 13. Almost at every wedding, right? Love is, what's the first word? Patient. Is that an emotion or is that a choice? Tell me. How many of you feel like being patient? I love waiting for my husband because he's always late. But I'm just going to, no. I love waiting in line at it. No. Love is patient. Waiting for them to figure it out, to change when they're ready, whatever it is. Love, you know what the Greek word patient literally means? Long-suffering. That's what it means. Love, according to the Bible, is patient. We live in an impatient culture. Second word, love is patient, love is, say it, kind. Emotion or choice? You choose to be kind, you choose to be rude. You choose to be thoughtful, you choose to be thoughtless. You choose to be considerate, you choose to be inconsiderate. You choose to be generous, you choose to be tight-fisted, close-minded, stubborn. Love is a choice. It's not an emotion. Therefore, I want us to marriage isn't about making you happy. It's about making you holy. Listen to this, Gary Thomas. Here's a quote. What if your partner's faults are God's tools to shape you? What if the very thing that most bugs you about your partner is God's plan to teach you something new? Are you willing to accept that your marriage makeover might begin with you? And then here's the third reflection, third point. Marriage is not about me, it's about us. Who's us? Listen to Ecclesiastes 4. Two people are better off than one, for they can help each other succeed. If one person falls, the other can reach out and help, but someone who falls alone's in real trouble. Likewise, two people lying close together can keep each other warm. But how can one be warm alone? A person standing alone can be attacked and defeated, but two can stand back to back and conquer. And then there's the next line. Three are even better. Us. Three are even better. A triple braided cord is not easily broken. Us is not just Natalie and I. Us is Natalie and I and God. Us is three. That cord of three strands is not quickly broken. God's dream for marriage is that we would invite him into our relationship. Now, I know some of you maybe don't like or respect or whatever, but there's a book that was written, and he's kind of a famous guy now, Dr. Phil, right? He has a book called Relationship Rescue where he reaches and he pulls a quote from the guy's last name's McLaughlin, and here's what the guy says. Really crazy, but listen to this. They report that the divorce rate in America today is still 50%. But among couples that pray together, it's about 1 in 10,000. 1 in 10,000. What is the meaning of that quote? When you have this cord of 3 strands, your husband, wife, don't do it on your own. Pray together. Invite God into your marriage and your family. Ask God, cry out for help, saying, I need help because I'm selfish. Before I got married, a mentor of mine, Craig Gamelgard, a buddy of mine too, he's in my pastor's roundtable. He'd been married a couple years. I said, I'm thinking about getting married. What's the hardest thing about getting married? I'll never forget his response. He said, realizing how selfish I am. Realizing how selfish, he didn't say my wife is, how I am. The number one enemy and destroyer of marriage today is not, and I said abandonment, abuse, or adultery. It's selfishness. That's what's destroying marriages today in our country. And our God is a God of hope, and He's a God of restoration. I want you to think about the gospel. God seeing this planet Earth broken. And what does He do? He initiates relationship. He sends His Son Jesus to planet Earth. And look what begins to happen. Read the Gospels. The blind receive their sight. Some of you this morning are blind. You cannot see. You cannot see your way ahead. You're blind in terms of how can we find a way to make our marriage work. Others of you are blind. You have just a serious blind spot. You're thinking, oh man, I talked to a guy this year who's been married for 40 years, and he says, my wife and I never argue. We have a great, perfect marriage. We don't have issues. And I want to talk to her. I want to go, you never have issues? What are you Jesus? I mean, even Jesus had issues. Even Jesus had issues, you guys. Going back to humility, Jesus came to open the eyes of the blind. Ask Him, God, if I'm blind, would you reveal to me my blind spot? Maybe that's your prayer today. What else happened when Jesus came? Families were restored. The outcast was brought home. The crippled were walked. Some of you are feeling crippled today in your relationship. And then also the dead were raised, right? And our God is about raising the dead. And that means dead relationships and dead marriages. And so I'm going to close. But I want to close with this thought. Tim Keller, some of you like that. He's written a book called The Meaning of Marriage. It is one of the best books. He goes through Ephesians 5. Do yourself a favor and read it. Here's one of the quotes in the book. And this is for those of you that are Christ followers. This is going to make sense, I hope. We must say to ourselves something like this. Well, when Jesus looked down from the cross, He didn't think, I'm giving myself to you because you're so attractive to me. No, He was in agony. And He looked down at us denying Him, abandoning Him, and betraying Him. And in His greatest act of love in history, He stayed. He stayed on that cross. He said, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Listen to this. He loved us not because we were lovely to Him, but to make us lovely. That is why I'm going to love my spouse. Speak to your heart like that, and then fulfill the promises you made on your wedding day. He loved us not because we were lovely, but to make us lovely. Do you know unconditional love will do that? And if you're in a really hard marriage, God is going to teach you how to love like He loves. He's going to make you more like Jesus. That's a wonderful thing. I know it's a hard thing. But when you get to heaven someday, God's going to say, well done. Jesus is out ahead of you. Followers of Jesus follow Jesus. Say that with me. Followers of Jesus follow Jesus. Let's do that in our marriages. Let me pray. Bow your head, close your eyes for a second, and just think about what you've heard this morning. Hopefully you've been both challenged and encouraged. We're going to be in this series for a month, so I'm going to invite you into a 30-day challenge. For the next 30 days, I'm going to invite you to have humility and courage in your marriage. Not be focused on trying to change her or him. But John Gottman, who many of you are aware of, Natalie and I actually spent a weekend on a John Gottman wedding retreat. All his research says that the two most significant ingredients to make a healthy, strong marriage are kindness and generosity. That's what separates the masters from the disasters. And so for the next 30 days, I think you have it in you with the help of God, and I have it in me with the help of God, that we're going to commit ourselves. We're not going to let our spouse dictate to us how we treat them. We are going to be committed to kindness and generosity for 30 days straight. We're going to live our faith in our marriage. Kindness. If you don't know how to be kind, come and talk to me. We'll have a conversation. If you don't know how to be generous, come and talk to me or our staff, and we'll have a conversation of what it means to be generous in marriage. And I'm serious about that. I know some like, I don't even know what to do. Okay, that's fine. Admit that. That takes humility, and come and talk to us. Some of you need to come for prayer this morning. I know it's getting late, but some of you are just in a place where you're saying, I need strength, I need hope, I need healing. So come down, whether you're by yourself or with your spouse, we want to pray for you. So Father, the stakes are so high. The stakes are so high. And I know your heart breaks when you see us in relationships that are strained and broken and difficult and floundering, and we're mean and not kind and not generous to each other. That's your plan, kindness and generosity. I pray that you'd fill each of us this morning, whether we're single, divorced, married, wherever we're at. Help us to live the next 30 days in our most important relationships with kindness and generosity. And we're going to let you do the life change and transform those relationships, primarily our marriages. In Jesus' name. And everybody said,